Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Meg Olson, and I'm the Grassroots Mobilization Director here at Network Lobby. We're so glad that you could join us today for this important conversation about Network's 2021 voting record. We're going to talk today, every vote counts for the future of democracy. And of course, you're going to hear about how the congressional voting record first of all, it's such a labor of love on our end. And I would especially like to thank my colleagues on the government relations team and the communications team for their hard work on it. And I'd like to thank all of you because we know that this is something that you all look forward to every year. And so we're always so excited to share it with you as we did this morning. And we know that it is a very important tool to evaluate our year on our Build Anew public policies and to build relationships with our members of Congress and to hold them accountable. So during our time today together, we're first going to hear about the importance of Network's voting record and our political ministry, Then we'll have a look back at 2021, which is the first session of the 117th Congress. Then we'll hear about what happened with voting rights this past year and kind of a look forward. And we'll also hear in the same vein about Build Back Better. And then I will talk to you about how to deliver the voting record to your member of Congress, especially as we are still, in our pandemic times. So thinking about how to do that. But first, just a little housekeeping. I think we're all very familiar with Zoom these days, but we do have closed captioning available, and you can find that on your toolbar. And if you click it, it'll turn them on. They are imperfect, so just be patient if words look a little funny. And then there will be definitely time for question and answers. And we hope that you could please type your questions into the Q&A box. This will record them for us so that especially if we don't get to everyone's questions, we'll have the opportunity to email you after the webinar. All right. So with us today, we have our Executive Director, Mary Novak, our Chief Lobbyist, Laura Peralta-Schulte, and our Government Relations Specialist, Jarrett Smith, and Minister Christian Watkins. So with that, I am going to hand it over to Mary Novak.
Thank you, Meg. Good afternoon and Happy New Year to those of you we haven't seen since last month. So in April 1972, now almost 50 years ago, Network opened its doors and embarked on a mission of political ministry in Washington, D.C. during the second term of the 92nd Congress. Political ministry is a ministry of presence, accompanying our elected officials in all political seasons, even the ones that are frustrating, being a consistent presence, calling our elected officials to put the well-being of people, communities, and our earth first in their legislating. Back in 1976, CSJ sisters Claire Dunn and Judith Lubchick, as well as Henry Nouwen, wrote this about Network's political ministry. A political ministry requires an informed mind and a caring heart, an acute understanding of tactics and strategies, and a warm sense of the need of the people to whom we want to be of service. Action in behalf of justice reflects a Christian life that is not misled by false dichotomies between prayer and action. There may be times when our prayer consists only of sighs too deep for words, but we know such sighs are the unfailing sign of God's Spirit within us, empowering us to continue the demanding labors toward which God inspires and propels us, and without which the question of who shall inherit the earth remains disturbingly open. So as we witness the continued efforts and effects of white supremacy in the United States today, promoting the common good means passing federal policies that dismantle systemic racism, cultivate inclusive community, eliminate the race, wealth, and income gap, and transform our politics. Policies that create the multiracial democracy we all deserve. So 2021 was my first year leading the network community in this political ministry. And it has been and continues to be an honor to carry on this 50-year ministry of presence to Capitol Hill and to do it in a community with you all. And now, as Meg mentioned, holding our elected officials accountable to their constituents and to the common good is one of the ways we live out this political ministry. And one of Network's most consistent exercises of this political ministry has been compiling our annual congressional record, a report card, if you will. And every year, Network staff selects the most consequential votes from the previous year that advanced or obstructed our policy agenda, calculating a score for each member of Congress that reflects how often they voted in alignment with what Network's policies. The scores reflect the members' commitment to protecting our democracy and advancing the common good. And so we need you to join us in this political ministry by sharing the 2021 voting record with your members of Congress. We need you to thank them for their votes that advanced the common good, which includes protecting our democracy. And if their votes did not move us towards a future where all can flourish, we need you to ask them to vote differently. We need you to help us be the constant presence, inviting members of Congress to always vote for justice. So you're going to hear more about that from Meg in a little while after you hear from our government relations team about what happened in 2021. So let's begin that process by me handing it over to Laura Peralta-Schulte, our Senior Director of Public Policy and Government Affairs. Laura, I know we did some deep sighing in 2021. Please fill us in on the details, what votes last year advanced our Build Anew agenda, and which ones moved us farther from being a just and inclusive society where everyone can thrive. Laura.
Thank you, Mary. It's so nice to be with the network today. And I just want to take this moment as a member of the government relations team to say thank you. I think the government relations team will be the first to say that we only have as much power as is derived by you. So it is your advocacy in district and your advocacy with members that really makes our work that much more easy. So in terms of the congressional voting record, you will see that Network scored 10 votes in 2021, 1 in the House and 9 in the Senate. And the record itself looked at COVID relief, protecting worker rights and voting rights, whether or not they supported creating a pathway to citizenship, reforming racist sentencing disparities, and Build Back Better. So it is my pleasure to kind of walk through what happened, and my colleagues will fill in specifically as it relates to both the voting bills as well as Build Back Better. So looking back at 2021, I think the network staff really was quite joyful to have President Biden come into office and really attempt to put the country on a different course. I think we cannot forget that we started the year with great hope in terms of January 5th and the elections in Georgia, where we had all-time highs voter turnout there that moved quickly to January 6th and the insurrection. So it is important to remember that that was really the background for our work, and really put a very strong point on our work, particularly as it relates to democracy, to ensure that our government survives beyond the last election. So as President Biden came into office, the first piece of work that the administration undertook was to unwind as much of the Trump infrastructure that they had put through in terms of executive orders to provide immediate relief for some of the worst programs. Now, that is not something that can always be accomplished in one day. And in fact, we saw movements towards taking away public charge, unwinding the Medicaid work requirement gap, unwinding the SNAP problems that they put in. That was a process, but a very welcome process, as the immediate work was to remove impediments to people getting access to benefits, and particularly in the immigration space, getting relief from deportations. So that was step number one. Step number two, which followed quite soon after and is definitely reflected in the voting record, Congress got to work very quickly on putting together a new package of supports for COVID. March was when this bill was passed, it was pre-Delta and variant. And so there was a lot that happened since the passage of that bill. But let me remind you of some of the true benefits of that bill. In it, you had things like expanded food programs for kids in school. You had a revolutionary inclusion of an expanded child tax credit that evidence has shown has lifted families out of poverty in such a substantive way. Remarkable policies, as well as expanding the earned income tax credit. You had things like temporary paid leave and sick leave for families that got that needed to take time off to heal. You had extraordinary measures in the space for healthcare to, again, expand healthcare to folks in this country who don't have it. That bill made a substantive difference for millions and millions of families living in the United States, contending with the pandemic problems, and really set the marker for the administration in terms of what their priorities would be. A lot of good news for us, because many of the proposals that they included in this bill are key parts of our Build Back agenda. As time went on, we saw a lot of action in the House on key bills. That's why you're going to see a differential between the 9 and the 1. Maybe not surprisingly, to those of you who watch Washington closely, again this year, we had a situation where bills going to the Senate often went there to die. There's one reason for that, and Christian will focus on that as we talk about democracy. But the filibuster, the requirement to have a supermajority to pass bills, remains a substantial problem. In terms of progress, again, it was only the big bills that got through, whether it was our freestanding immigration bills, some of our labor bills like the PRO Act, other key bills, just could not garner the 60 votes necessary to get through the Senate, and therefore it was only the big packages that went forward. There was a very, particularly as it relates to Build Back Better, to democracy, I will say there is a very dramatic political dynamic that you all probably are witnessing very closely. And that is, there are substantially different views between Democrats on how to move forward on many provisions. You've got a core group of progressives that frankly were the ones that pushed hardest for the Biden agenda. And you had other members that were less inclined to push forward with new government programs. And so all year long, particularly as we headed into the fall, you saw tension between the two factions of Democrats. Why am I not talking about Republicans at this point? Because it became very clear, even in the context of the rescue plan, that they did not want to play in this space. And so it really was incumbent upon Democrats to put together bills only with Democratic members to do the kinds of things that needed to get done. Again, Christian and Jarrett will walk you through where their focus is this year, but all eyes are on Senators Manchin and Sinema. It is really clear that because the Democrats have such small margins, both in the House and in the Senate, any outliers really set the tone, really become the center of negotiation for what can get done. So, so again, just a deep thanks to all of you who called and talked to your members about our bills. I'm going to stop right now and welcome my colleagues to jump in and go deeper on some of the core issues ahead of us.
Thank you so much, Laura. Now we're going to hear from Minister Christian Watkins about what happened in voting rights. So thank you, Christian.
And thank you for the opportunity to be with you all. My name is Minister Christian Watkins, a new recent hire, a new hire for Network Lobby, and I am a United Methodist from Dallas, Texas that is in love with the Catholic community. So thank you for this opportunity to update you all on what's happening around voting rights. I recently picked up the portfolio from Sister Quincy, whom I love, and whose work it continues to set us up for success. Within the context of what's been done in the faith advocacy community, there's two basic pieces of legislation that we saw come to fruition or come to Senate debate on January 19th, on Wednesday, January 19th. We have one, the For the People Act, which was first introduced in January of 2021. It was a comprehensive bill that passed the United States House and was sent to the Senate to help eliminate dark money from American politics, from the voting process, and also to expand voting access by same-day voter registration, no excuse absentee voting provisions, and other provisions. That bill went to the Senate and was renamed the Freedom to Vote Act. It was a compromise bill brought about by the needs for Senators Manchin and Sinema to make sure that the entire Democratic Party was on board with the pieces of legislation, that those improvements or that bill included improvements to help in partisan gerrymandering, as well as invoke protections against election subversion, which we saw as a result of the 2020 elections, where the state legislatures were looking to vote to change the will of the American voters after citizens had already voted. Those pieces of legislation were ultimately filibustered in the Senate. And we also have the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act that was first introduced on October 5th of 2021. It basically included provisions against racial gerrymandering, as well as to basically restore the 1964 Voting Rights Act that was weakened by the 2013 Shelby County Supreme Court case. The John Lewis Voting Rights, or the Voting Advancement Act, failed to vote for cloture, which is basically the legislative maneuver that would overcome the Senate filibuster back in November 2021. And ultimately, last week, over 3 days, both bills, the bills were combined into one to be debated in the Senate. It was eventually filibustered, and the legislation was blocked from passing successfully. Ultimately, at around 11 o'clock p.m. on Wednesday, January 19th, in a 48-52 vote, the Senate failed to approve Senate Majority Leader Schumer's proposal to reform the Senate rules to pass both of the pieces of legislation by a simple majority. So last week's debate was the first time the bills had been debated by almost every senator, giving them opportunity to weigh in on their stances on the legislation. And none of this, even though the votes passed, even though the pieces of legislation failed, none of this could not have happened without the incredible work done across the country by organizations like Network Lobby and our co-conspirators here on Capitol Hill, as well as individuals like you all. So please do not take that failed vote as a death knell to democracy. It is definitely not. As we have heard, or as I have heard, no major legislation passes without dying 1,000 times before it passes. So we're taking this time. To reset, refocus, and recommit to the work. We know that this fight continues. Martin Luther King started us off very well back in the 60s, and now the time is more crucial to ramp up that work, to be more committed to the cause of voting rights in America. The freedom to vote has been an ongoing battle since our nation's inception, and will continue until every citizen in this country has the freedom to vote fairly and equitably in every election. If you get the chance to actually witness some of the debate that was happening on Capitol Hill, the conversation between the senators, if you can muster the stomach strength or the mental fortitude to watch some of the debates, you would see that there were some really impassioned truths and convictions for the betterment of our American democracy, given that transcends the rhetoric and misconceptions for these dire bills, that are direly needed. Within the past week, within the past couple of weeks, if not beforehand, we've all felt Martin Luther King Jr.'s fierce urgency of now, and it will still be felt because of advocates like you all, keeping your hand on the gospel plow, as we say in seminary world, in seminary and pastor land, to basically keep up the good fight, to keep up the work that needs to happen in order for these bills to come to the floor and be voted on again. So the DC and national faith and secular advocacy communities are focused on taking this time to reassess and to draw out plans going forward. We are expected to hear more from Senate Leader Schumer, as well as the Senate Democrats and the White House on voting rights soon. There's no expected timeline, but we expect there is talk that there should be information coming forthwith. And the legacy civil rights organizations like the NAACP and the Leadership Conference, which we are a member of, and many other organizations strong in the advocacy community across the country will be continuously strategizing and finding ways in order to move these pivotal pieces of legislation forward. So that is my update on voting rights, and I pray that you all stay getting in good trouble.
So Build Back Better Act is probably, I would argue, the seminal piece of President Biden's agenda. Every president has at least the first year to establish what their legacy is going to be. And President Biden, on the campaign trail, talked about many of the policies that were part of Build Back Better, whether it was housing investments, child tax credit extension, immigration reform, climate change investment money, many big big priorities were a part of this piece of legislation. Network worked with our faith and secular partners to advocate. We hosted a press conference on the Capitol grounds. Speaker Pelosi spoke at that press conference. This was, a matter of weeks before the bill was brought to the House floor. We even got coverage in the Washington Post talking about how the faith community led the way to get Build Back Better passed. And so before we went on holiday break, we were blessed with the House passing the Build Back Better Act on November 19th. We were all delighted. It was a great expression of all the hard work we had put into this piece of legislation for many months. So once the bill passed, it went over to the Senate. And as many of you know, listening to my colleague, Minister Christian Watkins, that the Senate has been a very difficult body of Congress to actually see our priorities turn into law. So with Build Back Better, we thought we were going to have some difficulty getting all of our priorities through. But I don't think anyone in our community thought the entire piece of legislation would have to be renegotiated from the ground up. Senator Manchin from the great state of West Virginia went on Fox News and said that he would not support Build Back Better because this piece of legislation is using what is called reconciliation. We need all of the Democrats plus the vice president to vote yes for this bill. Because of Senator Manchin's statement, now we are in a rebuilding, re-advocacy position. So right now, we've seen a number of statements about what could be in a future Build Back Better piece of legislation. The president and senior members of the Senate have said that they expect there will be money in the bill for climate, for free pre-K, even Senator Neal, the chair of Ways and Means in the House, believes that he can structure the child tax credit in a manner that even Senator Manchin will support it. So what do we expect to be the way forward? There will be some piece of legislation. It will not have all of our priorities, and it will have a number of pieces of legislation that will stay as law for a much longer period of time. So what we need is for you to continue your advocacy in the districts where you live, and for the senators that represent your respective states. We expect that we shall see a revised Build Back Better Act before the 1st of March, when the president gives his State of the Union. So we shall see something very soon. It probably will only have 4 or 5 big pieces of legislation in it, but I do believe that it will be transformational for our country. This is an opportunity to invest in the average American, And we need to make sure that this piece of legislation becomes law. Even though we're not getting everything that we want, it just means that next year that we have to continue our advocacy to make sure that we can build anew here at Network Lobby.
Thank you so much, Jared, for that. So now we're going to take a pause for some questions and answers for Mary, Laura, Christian, and Jarrett. So if you all want to bring your cameras back on, that would be great. You can definitely type your questions into the
All right, well, it appears that Meg is still having some technical difficulties. That's fine. We will roll with it. You can type your questions into the chat and we will direct them to the government relations staff member who is best able to answer your question. All righty, I see a great question. Has there been any linking or discussions with members of the Problem Solvers Caucus in both the House and the Senate? Who would like to take that one?
I don't mind just jumping in and then folks can follow up. So yeah, the squishy middle, as we like to call them, has really been the center of all of our advocacy last year, and my sense it'll continue to be. Whoever asked this question, Ellen, you were savvy, because I think you know that there were bipartisan discussions on the infrastructure bill and those and bipartisan discussions on what should the elements be in Build Back Better. I would just say that in terms of members that we have spoken to that are moderate, they were very, very surprised by Mr. Manchin's pulling the plug last year on Build Back Better. They took hard votes. They took votes requiring people in their district to pay more taxes. And they took those votes understanding that there were going to be benefits flowing back to their districts. So we, again, are very focused on them. We want to affirm the hard votes that they took that are reflected in the voting record. You know, just the math of it means we keep working to try to make sure that they come to a place where they can come to agreement, and we get pieces done, whether they are the Build Back Better agenda or anything else.
Excellent. Thank you, Laura. Anyone else want to jump in, or did Laura cover it all? Looks good. All right. Let's dive into our next question. This is from Celeste. If we know that our senators are already well on board for a given piece of legislation, for example, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, and we have already contacted them once or more to let them know about our support, is it important to continue to contact them as long as the legislation keeps having its ups and downs? Should we keep poking them? What do we think?
If I can jump in, Catherine. Celeste, thank you for that question. I would say yes, you need to continue to contact them and thank them for their support, and ask them to talk to their colleagues and ask them to support the bill as well. It's, you know, in DC, for legislators, there are a lot of issues going on. If they do not hear from their constituents, they believe that, you know, maybe something that may have been an issue is no longer an issue. So until we get this bill across the finish line, please call your senators, call your representatives, and at the bare minimum, thank them for their support and ask them to continue their advocacy with their colleagues.
And I'll just say, from a grassroots mobilization perspective, it's also a really wonderful way to be in relationship, just to be kind of having those conversations on a regular basis. All right, the next question. If the filibuster is dead, what can we ever get past? So where does that leave us if we're having trouble making changes to the filibuster?
I'll jump in for a quick second before Laura offers her political expertise. They're keeping up public pressure on our elected officials to do what they can do in order to use every tool that they have in their legislative toolbox to get legislation passed, to also reach across the aisle and to talk with their colleagues in order to come up with sensible and equitable compromises, not compromises to water down bills, not compromises to just offer fruitless or toothless pieces of legislation. That kind of conversation needs to be had from the citizenry, from their constituents. So keeping up pressure on them, being in constant communication with them, building relationships with their offices in order to let them know that you, as a constituent of theirs, whether Republican or Democrat or independent, holding them accountable. That's the action that can overcome the Senate filibuster. That's just my read on things. Laura, Mary, Jared, do y'all have anything more to add?
I just want to say amen. For those of you who may be in Arizona, you saw over the weekend, there was a real reaction to people in Arizona about the fact that Senator Sinema held up, in such an obnoxious way, frankly, held up that bill. So unless politicians, unless they're held accountable, there are all kinds of forces, money in particular, that can color their vision. So again, we are not joking when we say that your work back home is disproportionately important to helping us kind of push something through in DC.
And I would just, say that elected officials have to understand their consequences to their votes, right? You have to come out and either advocate for another candidate or vote for another candidate, or support a candidate in some fashion. If you, our grassroots folks, don't do it, then no one's going to do it. I mean, we need you out there telling elected officials that, hey, we don't like, these positions, these policy positions you're taking, and there will be consequences. That's the only way we're going to get the agenda that, is so important to Network and to all of you.
Thank you. So our next question is kind of the opposite of a question we had already, but a couple people have asked now, basically, if my member of Congress never agrees, if they are solidly on the other side, contacting them seems to have no effect on their voting. Should I still be contacting them? What are your thoughts on that?
And I would jump in and say yes. I mean, every office records when a constituent calls, makes contact. Just continue to, make your opinion known to that office, and see if you can get a meeting with senior staff or the member, and walk them through your position. But please continue the dialogue. I mean, it's critical that even if people do not agree with us, they actually hear us.
Just want to agree with that and just say, we are going to be fighting like the Dickens to extend the refundable child tax credit. That tax credit in 6 months, there is evidence to show that it has reduced child poverty in this country by 40%. And in some, if you cut that down from a demographic standpoint, in 60+%. In particularly in communities that have been excluded from resources due to systemic discrimination. So there is no reason why members in Indiana whose citizens have been receiving a child tax credit should be off the hook for not supporting that. And in fact, they have played the opposite role in the debate, where they have attacked the administration on the merits of the child tax credit, calling it welfare. So there is always a way to go to the issues: healthcare, tax credits, housing, and ask them to do better. So that is a definite yes, as well as there'll be some opportunities later in the year that you'll hear about next time we meet, where we need Republicans to get it over the finish line.
All right, Meg, do you want to take it from here?
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Catherine. So hopefully all of you today received the action alert email with the voting record in it. Or perhaps you are a member of Network and you received connection in your mail, or that it's coming soon. So now is the time to deliver this voting record to your member or members of Congress. It's time for that accountability piece. It's time for that, hopefully, thank you, and how do we move forward? Or that time for, hey, I'm really disappointed in your lack of voting for the common good, and I know you can do better. So I know for many of you, you take great pride and joy in going into your member of Congress's office with the voting record in hand and dropping it off. And I wish I could say that we could all just go forth and do that. However, in these times, we're going to have to do things a little differently. So there are 3 different ways that we're suggesting that you can deliver the voting record to your member of Congress's district office. And this is really important. This district office delivery helps you build that relationship, right? You are a constituent contacting them with this important document, with your thoughts about your elected official's voting record. So you can decide whether you want to schedule a virtual meeting with a member of Congress's district office. This is especially great if you kind of want to talk through very carefully the different aspects of the voting record. You can email the voting record to the district office. Or if you feel safe in this time to do it, you can schedule a time to meet up with a staff person and drop the voting record off. And of course, with this, you would want to have a cover letter, and you would look up your nearest district office to do that. Whichever method you choose, please call the nearest district office ahead of time. Whether you need to, right, if you're setting up a meeting with a state director or a district director, it is the district office that will help you schedule that meeting. You maybe need the email address of your state director or district director, or if you are going to see if the office is open and willing to receive the voting record as well. Okay. Next slide, please. So some of the messages, let's walk through the various messages we want to share with our member of Congress. So if you are setting up a virtual visit or want to, contact your Democratic senator, either through email or in an in-person delivery, first, of course, you want to say thank you, right? Thank you for the American Rescue Plan. Thank you for providing relief to hundreds of thousands of families during this time in the pandemic. And then you need to pivot, right? We just heard Jarrett talk about Build Back Better, and we still need to pass that bill, right? We need this package, and we want that to include a refundable child tax credit, Medicaid expansion for the 12 states that have yet to expand, funding for affordable housing, and a pathway to citizenship for immigrants. So again, these are the 4 things we want to see in the Build Back Better package. All right, next slide, please. If you are doing a virtual visit or sending a message to a passing representative, first you want to thank them for those votes that they took out of the 9 that we scored. And then you want to ask, how can we support you, right? Especially for those with very high scores. They took some risks this year, right? There are a lot of House members in really challenging districts, and they're heading into an election year. And yet they stood with, people of color and immigrants and working families and said, yes, we're going to support this agenda. So very important to ask, how can we continue supporting you? They need to, I know we have questions about 100%ers. What do I have to do? They need to know that you support them, that you have their back. They need this coverage heading into this midterm. And then the message you want to send to your failing members of Congress. Of course, we want to express disappointment, and remember to do that with still politely, still in a tone of welcome, of meeting them where they are. And then offer, how can you can do better, right? You have these opportunities. I hope that you take this opportunity in this new session to work across the aisle, to build anew, to listen to the people, however you want to phrase it, right? Because we know that most of our members of Congress hopefully can do the right thing, right? We just have to remind them that, right, they are representing we the people. So those are the 3 different messages, and you will receive this all in a follow-up email. So don't feel like you had to frantically write this down. And now let's just go to the final slide, please, about delivering the voting record. So a couple of things you can do, help network out with as we're tracking all of this voting record activity. We have a webpage, networklobby.org/voting record delivery. If you can just let us know what member of Congress you're going to visit, or what members, if you're choosing to do more than one, and then how you're going to do it. Especially if you are setting up those virtual visits, we really want to track that so that our government relations team can follow up. And also, so if you need a little help, our Grassroots Mobilization Team is there to provide assistance. If you need to download a copy of the voting record, that is also on our webpage, the 2021 voting record. And then if you go on a virtual visit, someone from the Grassroots Mobilization Team, most likely Emily, Catherine, or myself, but perhaps Elisha Cullen, will follow up with you for a report back form. And yeah, if you want to take a screenshot, or if you are going to make that visit to that office, if it feels safe, that drop off, you can take a picture of that too. So, but yeah, definitely report back to us how it went. All right, so wrapping up here with our time together, just a couple of exciting events that we're having in this upcoming year, our 50th year. March 1st, hard to believe it'll be President Biden's State of the Union that night. And so we are going to have our March community conversation is a pre-State of the Union, really talking about what we hope we want to hear. How is Biden doing at living out Catholic social justice and our Build Anew agenda? And something that we're all very excited about, and we're going to start having registration open at the end of this week, is Saturday, April 9th. We are hosting with, oh my gosh, probably 20 other supporters, White Supremacy and American Christianity, a conversation with Robert P. Jones and Father Brian Massengale. And again, you'll be able to register for that soon. It'll be the conversation with them, a response from Marcia Chatelain, and then an opportunity to have small group discussion with people from all across the country. We have so many more events even this week, next week. So please always check out our Network Lobby events calendar. Just keep in touch and stay tuned. So I would just like to thank so much my colleagues, Catherine and Emily and Colin and the rest of the Grassroots Mobilization Team who supported me today as I struggled with my tech issues and just jumped in. Hopefully you had a pretty seamless experience. And just a gratitude to Mary and Laura and Christian and Jarrett for their presentations. And thank you to you for joining us and for your passion about the voting record and for your commitment to building those relationships with your members of Congress, for going on these visits, for making those phone calls, and for holding them accountable for this past year and how they can move forward.